This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Guerin.
No news is good news. Investors were in a buying mood on a quiet day on Wall Street, turning out a triple-digit gain on the blue chip Dow index and sending the Nasdaq to a 14-year high.
Housing disconnect. Why home builder confidence is gaining steam, even as the housing market itself is cooling off.
And cute but expensive. Why it'll cost you almost $250,000 to raise a child, and that's not including college. We have all that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, August 18th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Well, it's been a kind of two steps forward, one step back year on Wall Street, and today, maybe a little surprisingly, was a step forward kind of day. The catalyst, really, was that there was no negative catalyst. There was no deterioration of the situation in eastern Ukraine over the weekend, thankfully. In fact, Ukraine's and Russia's foreign ministers met for lengthy talks in Berlin with moderate progress cited by Ukraine's Klimkin. Iraqi and Kurdish troops retook a strategic dam in northern Iraq and Gaza. And in Gaza, Israel and Palestinian militants reportedly extended their truce. In the U.S., home builder sentiment improved, and the dollars were flying as Dollar General bid $9.7 billion for Family Dollar. Put it all together, and you have a recipe for a 14-year high for NASDAQ and a rally in the S&P 500 that took it to within a percentage point of an all-time high. Here's how the stocks finished the day at their highs, by the way. The Dow up 1%, adding 175 points. Disney and Home Depot, all-time highs for those two. NASDAQ was up 43. It ended at its highest close since March of 2000, and the S&P was up 16. Crude oil down 94 cents. It settled at 96.41, lowest level in 7 months on those easing tensions in Iraq, and news that Libya has increased production. The falling price of oil helped lift airline stocks, including United, Continental, American, Delta, Southwest, and JetBlue. They were all up more than 2%.
Our guest tonight says investors are buying up stocks of American companies because the U.S. is the global safe haven. He's Scott Wren, senior equity strategist at Wells Fargo Advisors. Scott, nice to have you on the program tonight. I guess the question is it safe? Is it safe for investors to be putting new money into the market given all of the uncertainties that are going on around the world?
Susie, there really are a lot of uncertainties. I think that on a relative basis, the U.S. is safe. And the reason I say that is because I think the economic growth here and the modest inflation is something that investors can count on. And I think that's why the money's coming here.
You know, Scott, the president last week took some heat for an alleged foreign policy principle that was sort of don't do anything stupid. And that was sort of, is that your principle? If the economic principle or the stock market principle is the U.S. is good because everybody else is bad, is that really a long-term formula for success?
That's really probably not, Tyler. But here's what I would say is I believe this modest growth, modest inflation environment that we've been really living with for the last 4 years is probably something we're going to be living with for the next few. Stocks can do well in that type of an environment, especially when that growth is pretty dependable, which I think it is, and valuations are very reasonable. They're only in line with the average if you look at something like a PE. So I think the stock market's a good place to be.
Scott, I want to ask you about the NASDAQ because it's been red hot recently in spite of all this geopolitical stuff. Now, we know that it's driven a lot by technology stocks, but if things do get a little bit intense on the geopolitical side, what does that mean for technology stocks? Will the NASDAQ just sell off like all the other stock averages?
Well, I think that large cap technology, which drives the NASDAQ, it's a big driver of the S&P 500. I think in the type of an environment that I envision, tech's going to do well. I think it's a place to be overweight. But if there's some turmoil in the market, these smaller cap tech names, they're going to feel it. I think the larger cap tech names are just like most stocks because there's a lot of uncertainty. So I expect higher volatility, not just in tech stocks, Susie. I think for the market as a whole over the next couple of months, we could see some good buying opportunities.
Scott, is the end of the Federal Reserve's bond buying, known as quantitative easing, it's supposed to end in October. Has that been priced into the market? And I ask because the last couple of times the Fed stepped back from pumping money that way into the system, stocks stumbled.
I think that the Fed realizes that that particular QE program, quantitative easing program, was pretty ineffective. I think the market likes it that the Fed's starting to get out of this. Always, Tyler, and you know this as well as anybody else, when the Fed starts to reverse course from easing to tightening, you don't know the timing. There's lots of uncertainty. It causes volatility. But the tapering program they have going on right now, the market's completely fine with that. That is going to have absolutely no effect on the stock market, in my opinion.
All right, we're going to be talking a lot about the Fed and all of this kind of stuff as the week goes on. But Scott, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Scott Wren of Wells Fargo Advisors.
Some good news today in housing. As we mentioned, confidence among the nation's home builders surged to an 8th-month high in August, and that sent shares of home builder stocks higher by more than 1% as a group. But that higher optimism comes despite slower home sales and housing starts in July. Diana Olick explains the disconnect.
More than 2/3 of the 30 units going into this townhouse complex just outside the nation's capital are already sold. 2 of them this past weekend. That, developer Bob Youngentag says, is because he picks the right locations for the right buyers.
Empty nester market here is exploding. You know, every time I look around, there are people like me with their kids going off to college thinking, why do I need, the big house in the suburbs anymore?
These units, priced at around $1.4 million, are tailor-built for baby boomers, while rental construction is rampant, targeting younger millennials.
As a developer, you have to be an eternal optimist, and I am. I believe that, well-located housing will continue to sell.
And he's not alone. A monthly homebuilder confidence index surged in August to the highest level since January. Its 3 components all gaining: current sales and sales expectations, with prospective buyer traffic leading the gains. While homebuilder confidence may be gaining steam, the housing market itself is cooling off. That's because all that optimism last year pushed home prices too far, too fast.
I think a lot of it is attributed to the fact that, in 2013, there was such a robust energy in the marketplace that every builder raised their prices, as you would expect them to do, relatively aggressively, and we probably priced some people out of the market.
Weaker demand and a steep drop in mortgage applications caused mortgage giant Fannie Mae to revise down dramatically its housing outlook for the year. It now predicts sales of newly built homes will rise just 1% from a year ago, rather than the 13% jump predicted just a month ago.
The most significant factor that drove our reduction is what we're hearing about supply constraints for builders and the difficulties that they're having in finding labor, materials, permitted land that they can build on, which has slowed down supply.
And 2015 is no longer expected to be a breakout year for housing, not with home prices still outpacing both job and wage growth and weaker affordability bulldozing demand. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Bethesda, Maryland.
To read more about the disconnect between home builder confidence and the housing market itself, head to our website, nbr.com.
Procter & Gamble, the big home products company, may be shedding some of its iconic household brands. P&G is in the process of reviewing up to 100 underperforming units and may be looking to sell off some of them. No decisions have been made yet, but Duracell batteries and Braun electric shavers are reportedly 2 of the biggest ones likely to go.
More now on that merger proposal we told you about at the top of the broadcast, with Dollar General looking to acquire rival Family Dollar for nearly $10 billion. Trumping a competing offer from Dollar Tree. Here's how shares of all 3 dollar retailers ended the day. Dollar General up nearly 12%. Family Dollar, that's the one everybody else seems to want to buy, up 5%. And Dollar Tree down more than 2%. Courtney Reagan now with more on what's behind the battle for Family Dollar and whether the stakes could go even higher.
It's the deal Wall Street anticipated all along.
I've been expecting Dollar General to buy these guys for 18 months. And I just was surprised that Dollar Tree, which is a very different business than Family Dollar, decided to make this transaction.
Dollar General is offering $78.50 per share in cash for Family Dollar, superior to Dollar Tree's $74.50 offer at the end of July. Additionally, Dollar General says the cost savings of its combination with Family Dollar would roughly double the amount estimated by Dollar Tree. The potential merger of Dollar General and Family Dollar creates a network 7,000 stores larger than a combination with Dollar Tree. Combined sales with Dollar General would be $28 billion annually. And because of the two retailers' similarities, analysts see Dollar General as the more attractive suitor.
Family Dollar and Dollar General should be able to absolutely attain significant synergies. It's a very similar box, same size, similar customer that they're going after, and the merchandise mix overlaps quite a bit. This is a winning deal within retail.
The competing bid for Family Dollar comes as Walmart continues to open smaller neighborhood stores, seen by some as what would be direct competition for Dollar General. But Dollar General CEO Rick Dreiling says the merger would keep them ahead in the smaller box store space.
The hit we've taken on those so far has actually been less than what happens when a Family Dollar opens up. And after a year where we've taken on that Walmart Express competition, our stores are cycling positive comp. So we view it as, again, just the normal day-to-day operation of competition.
Dreiling will also stay on through 2016 to lead Dollar General through the merger should it gain regulatory approval, delaying a planned retirement for next year. The battle for Family Dollar is far from over. Dollar General is now waiting to see how Family Dollar responds, if Dollar Tree ups its offer, and ultimately what regulators have to say about either combination. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
Still ahead on the program, Google stock, the top holding of mutual funds, turns 10 tomorrow. Not only has it changed the tech world and our everyday lives, but its returns have been a gift for shareholders that many hope will keep giving.
Mixed news about jobs. The Labor Department says unemployment rates rose in 30 states during July, even as employers stepped up hiring, adding more than 200,000 jobs. The reason? More Americans are jumping back into the workforce looking for a new job. Now, Mississippi had the highest unemployment rate in the country at 8%. North Dakota continues to have the lowest, 2.8%, thanks to the energy boom in that state.
Here's another interesting and surprising new survey about how little so many Americans have saved for their retirement, including more than a third of us who've saved zero. Breaking that down, Bankrate.com says more than 2/3 of millennials, these are people aged 18 to 29, have nothing saved for retirement yet. A third of those aged 30 to 49, these are the prime working years, have set aside no savings for retirement as well. And a quarter of people aged 50 to 64 have nothing saved up. And 1 in 7 of those already of retirement age, this is 65 and over, have no savings set aside.
Wow. Before many of us can even think about retirement, there is the daunting and increasingly high cost of raising a family. And a new government report out shows just how costly having a child can be right now. Morgan Brennan has the story.
It's getting more expensive to have a kid.
The economy today is definitely not great, but the cost for raising a child is definitely up there.
Here in the U.S., the average middle-class family can now expect to spend $245,340 to raise a child to adulthood. Adjusted for future inflation, nearly $305,000. That's according to a new report from the USDA, and it's up nearly 2% since last year. Those totals include food, childcare, healthcare, education, and housing for the first 18 years of a child's life. One thing that's not factored in? College tuition, a hefty expense that has itself been on the rise. The USDA says parenting costs have actually outpaced inflation. In 1960, child-rearing averaged a little more than $25,000, or just under $199,000 in today's money. That increase is due to two things. The cost of health care has more than doubled as an expense, and second, modern-day child care, an expense that was insignificant 50 years ago. But financial advisors say parents do have options for navigating these rising costs.
Well, parents should actually be communicating some of the financial realities to their children. As early as 5 years old, we have the opportunity to communicate varying levels of information to them, inviting them into the notion of an allowance and chores.
And where a family decides to live can play a part as well. The Northeast is the most expensive, thanks largely to the high price of housing. But the urban South is dramatically cheaper, as is the urban Midwest. A high-income family in the Northeast could expect to spend $455,000 on just one child, while a low-income family in a rural part of the country could spend only $145,000. But there is a silver lining. The USDA also finds that the more kids a family has, the lower the price per child. As toys and clothing are shared and as food, one of the highest costs, is purchased in larger bulk quantities that tend to sell at discount.
And if you want to keep up with the Joneses, then I'm sure it's more than $140,000.
Even so, parents keep feeling the pinch. It's enough to make anyone want to eat their shoe. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Urban Outfitters' profit fell, but sales were higher, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The parent company of Anthropologie and Free People blamed higher expenses for the profit drop and said sales at its namesake brand continue to slip. Sales were flat, and its gross margins narrowed. All that bad news overshadowed better than expected revenue. Shares were volatile in after-hours trading. During the regular trading session, though, the stock was up about 2.5% to $36.92. Struggling teen retailer Aeropostale announced some shifts in management. The company is rehiring Julian Geiger as its CEO, replacing Thomas Johnson. The company also announced that second quarter sales plunged, but it is forecasting a narrower than expected loss. Shares initially popped after hours. During the regular session, shares were up 2% to $3.24. Well, night owls will be happy to hear that Target is keeping stores open later. The retailer announced plans to extend shopping hours by 1 or 2 hours at more than half of its stores in the U.S. in hopes of drawing more customers to its locations after a really challenging year. Shares rose 1.5% to $58.55.
DreamWorks Animation saw its shares pop after the company appointed a new chief financial officer, former executive at DirecTV. Separately, the latest movie from the studio, How to Train Your Dragon 2, became the highest-grossing animated film of this year. Shares jumped about 9.5% on the session to $22.55. Shares of Fabrinet plummeted after the electronics manufacturing services company postponed its fourth quarter and full-year earnings results. It cited an internal investigation into its accounting practices as the reason for the delay. That's never good news. Shares tumbled 18% to $14.53. And the folks at Google did a little shopping today, buying Jetpack, a tech startup that makes city guides and recommendations for travelers based on popular photos posted on Instagram and other social networking sites. No terms were disclosed for the Jetpack. Class A shares of Google, though, up 1.5% to $592.70.
Well, on the subject of Google, it was 10 years ago today that the search giant priced its initial public stock offering at just $85 a share. A decade later, Google's grown into the world's second-largest tech company, trailing only Apple in market cap. And if you look inside Google's numbers, the facts and figures are staggering. Josh Lipton has the story.
Google. It's not just a company, it's a verb, and a lot has changed since the company first went public. Let's start with the market cap, which now exceeds $390 billion. That's greater than Microsoft, Facebook, IBM, Oracle, or Intel. It's nearly twice the market cap of JP Morgan and just slightly less than the value of Exxon. Investors who poured money into Google have enjoyed an incredible return. In fact, shareholders have reaped a gain of nearly 1,300% over the past decade. That dwarfs the return of the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ over the same time period. And that massive stock run-up has made Google's co-founders very wealthy. Larry Page and Sergey Brin are both now worth more than $31 billion each. That puts them both in the world's top 20 billionaires, according to Forbes.
The business model that Larry and Sergey and Eric Schmidt have created is maybe not quite as good as the discovery of oil, but up there. I mean, the online advertising business that they've created generates just mountains of cash.
Google has continued to grow rapidly over the past decade. Its revenues reached $16 billion in the latest quarter, and the company now has more than 52,000 employees. At the core of its business is search and the advertising generated from those queries. And the numbers on Google Search are massive by any metric. Google processes over 3.5 billion searches every day and more than 1.2 trillion per year. And as all these numbers continue to grow almost daily, there's no question Google wants to remain the world's destination when it comes to accessing the wealth of information at home, at work, and in an increasingly mobile world. Josh Lipton, Nightly Business Report, Silicon Valley.
Coming up, why smaller biotech companies are on the front lines of the fight against obesity, not big pharma. As if being in a hospital isn't troublesome enough, some people may have had their personal data hacked while they were getting better. Community Health Systems, one of the nation's biggest hospital groups, says it was the victim of a cyber attack that originated in China, and that the personal data of 4.5 million patients, including names, birth dates, Social Security numbers, was stolen during April and June.
With so many overweight Americans, you'd think big pharmaceutical giants would be at the forefront of treating obesity. But that's not the case. And as Meg Terrell explains, there's good reasons why small biotech firms are the ones leading the fight against fat.
It's a disease that affects 1 in 3 American adults, more than 78 million people. But using drugs to treat obesity has been an uphill battle.
People have regarded obesity as a problem of the patient. Very much that it's their responsibility for becoming obese, and it's their responsibility to become lean again, as if that works.
But how exactly is obesity defined? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it's a body mass index, a measurement of height and weight, of 30 or more. For example, for a person who is 5'9", a weight greater than 203 pounds is considered obese.
And despite the market potential, the obesity space is dominated by smaller biotechs. 2 years ago, Vivus and Arena got approval for the first new drugs for obesity in more than a decade, and a third drug from Orexogen is under review at the FDA now.
Big pharma companies were in this space years ago, but have mostly pulled out over safety concerns with drugs like Fen-Phen, Meridia, and Acomplia, all pulled from the market.
The last experiences we've had in the space have been negative and really discouraged any innovation or investment into the space. So it's taken small biotech companies to innovate.
That's not the only reason this big market is dominated by smaller players.
They're primarily physician caution, reimbursement, and potentially a lack of resources with the launches we've seen so far.
There's a fourth company on the scene, Zafgen, which takes a new approach to fighting obesity.
It works to really impact the way that the body handles fat. And in so doing, it suppresses the way that the liver makes fat out of the food that we eat. It also stimulates the release of fat from our adipose tissue, and at the same time, we see a very powerful reduction in hunger.
Conversely, diabetes drugs are an active space for development. The market worldwide is $54 billion. That for a disease linked to obesity. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell.
Federal safety officials said today they want to require that high-tech cars of the future be able to talk with each other so that they can avoid collisions. The National Traffic Safety Administration says the technology could prevent an estimated 600,000 left turn and intersection crashes a year, saving more than 1,000 lives.
And finally tonight, what do you think cars might be like 25 years from now? And with more drivers expected on the road, how bad will traffic be in another quarter century? Well, the future of transportation and solutions to expected problems are being worked on right now. Phil LeBeau gives us a look at what might be next.
Tired of traffic? Well, it's only getting worse. Over the next 25 years, it's estimated another 10 million vehicles will hit American roads and will spend even more time behind the wheel.
The problem's likely to get worse before it gets better, but there are a lot of things in development that give us hope for the future.
One solution? self-driven cars. Tech firms like Google and automakers like Mercedes-Benz will use real-time traffic data to have cars take us to our destination faster with fewer headaches.
One of our main intentions actually is, on the one hand, increase safety, reduce the number of accidents, but also giving time back, actually giving convenience back to our customers.
Bob Lutz, former vice chairman of General Motors, goes even further. By 2039, he sees autonomous drive modules chauffeuring us, often on high-speed freeways where inductive electric lines in the pavement recharge the modules as they zip along, without us steering or controlling the speed.
The primary driver of this vision that I describe of the electrified standardized modules is the need for efficiency in human transportation. Is this great news for the car fan? No, it isn't, but I don't see the problem being solved any other way.
Almost everyone admits it will take time for self-driving cars to take off, because state and federal regulators will be hesitant to allow people to turn over their driving duties to computers and sensors in cars. But make no mistake, electric and self-driven cars are coming, and with them, hopefully a whole new way to avoid traffic headaches. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
For more on what the future of transportation might look like, including the airline industry, go to our website, nbr.com. And that's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Susie Garib. Thanks for watching.
I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we'll hope to see you right back here tomorrow night.
I'm Susie Garib with a Nightly Business Report news brief. Stocks rallied today, getting a boost from home builder sentiment leaping to an 8-month high. Dollar General bidding nearly $10 billion to acquire rival Family Dollar, and no new flare-ups in the Russia-Ukraine conflict to spook investors. By the closing bell on Wall Street, the Dow soared 175 points, getting help from all-time highs for shares of Disney and Home Depot. The Nasdaq surged 43, ending at a 14-year high, and the S&P added 16 points. Target is extending the closing time at about half of its stores to 11 p.m. or midnight to lure in more late-night shoppers. And a surprising new government report says it now costs $245,000 to raise a child to age 18, and that doesn't include even college. Be sure to tune into Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.